Have you ever watched your family politely calculate your net worth right in front of you? When they demanded my house and cars during our asset talks, they expected me to beg or fight. Instead, I just said, "Fine, give it all to them right now." The room went dead silent. They thought they had finally won the jackpot. They had no idea that I had just locked the only door that would ever let them back into my life. My name is Kayla Paul, and at 29 years old, I serve as the operations manager for Crestline Freight Solutions. My entire career is built on the ability to predict disaster before it happens. In logistics, you have to know which routes are prone to delays, which drivers are liable to cut corners, and exactly how much weight a bridge can hold before it collapses. I spend 40 hours a week managing risk, ensuring that valuable cargo gets from point A to point B without being intercepted or destroyed. I am good at it because I do not trust luck. I trust paperwork, I trust tracking numbers, and I trust binding contracts. However, standing in the kitchen of my grandparents' lake house in Maple Cove, Wisconsin, slicing lemons for iced tea, I realized that the most volatile cargo I would ever have to manage was currently sitting in my living room. I had organized this gathering myself. It was a strategic move, a necessary maintenance of the facade. If I did not invite them, if I kept the gates closed and the blinds drawn, the narrative would shift instantly. They would tell the neighbors and the extended relatives that Kayla had become cold, that Kayla was hoarding the family legacy, that Kayla was too distant to understand the importance of family unity. So, I invited them. I bought the expensive steaks my father liked. I stocked the beer my brother, Logan, preferred. I scrubbed the baseboards and polished the windows until the late afternoon sun off the lake turned the glass into sheets of gold. This house was not just a piece of real estate to me, it was the only place in the world where the air felt breathable. My grandparents had left it to me specifically, bypassing my parents entirely, a decision that had caused a seismic rift in the family geology 3 years ago. To me, this place was the smell of old pine needles, the sound of the dock creaking under bare feet, and the memory of my grandfather teaching me how to read a compass to the 4 people sitting in my living room. However, this house was simply a large, liquid asset that was inconveniently trapped in my name. I carried the tray of drinks out to the deck. The conversation paused as I opened the screen door, a classic sign that they had been talking about me. "Here we go," I said, forcing a smile that did not quite reach my eyes. "Lemonade for Mom, beer for Logan and Dad. Derek, I got you that scotch you mentioned last Christmas." My Uncle Derek took the glass without saying thank you. He was a man who moved through life as if he were constantly appraising it. He did not look at the sunset over the water, which was painting the sky in brilliant shades of violet and orange. Instead, his eyes were tracing the roofline of the boathouse. He was looking for rot. He was looking for weakness. He was calculating how much a coat of paint would increase the listing price. "The deck is holding up well," Derek said, stamping his foot slightly on a wooden plank. It was not a compliment. It was an inspection. "Although lumber prices are through the roof right now, if you ever needed to do repairs, Kayla, it would cost you a fortune. A single girl on a single income? That is a lot of pressure." "I manage, Derek," I said, taking a sip of my tea. "I have a budget. I stick to it." "Budgets break," my father chimed in. He was sitting in the Adirondack chair, looking comfortable in a way that annoyed me. He treated this place like he owned it, like my ownership was just a clerical error that would eventually be corrected. "You know, honey, we were just saying how much work this place is. The maintenance alone is a full-time job. You are working so hard at Crestline. You look tired." "I am fine, Dad. I like the work. It keeps me grounded." My mother sighed, the sound sharp and performative. "We just worry about you, Kayla, isolating yourself out here on the weekends. It is not healthy. You should be in the city, meeting people, not fixing leaky faucets and worrying about property taxes." I watched them. It was a masterclass in manipulation. They were not attacking me. They were suffocating me with concern. They framed their greed as benevolence. They wanted to strip me of my inheritance for my own good. It was exactly what happens in the corporate world when a larger company wants to acquire a smaller one. They do not say they want to strip it for parts. They say they want to offer strategic partnerships and synergies. I felt a vibration in the pocket of my jeans. I pulled my phone out, shielding the screen from Logan, who was sitting on the railing nearby, scrolling through social media while nursing his third beer. It was an email. The sender was Mara Ellison, my attorney. The subject line was simple: final confirmation. The preview text read, "The trust documents and the LLC transfer have been finalized and recorded as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. The hard copies are in my safe. You are secure." I felt a physical weight lift off my chest, a tension I had been carrying for 6 months suddenly evaporating. I slid the phone back into my pocket. My face remained neutral, but my heart was hammering a rhythm of victory. They did not know. They were sitting here, eating my food and drinking my liquor, plotting how to carve up a turkey that had already flown out the window. "What is it?" Logan asked, looking up. "Work trouble?" "Just a notification," I said. "Nothing that cannot wait." "You are always working," Derek said, shaking his head. He stood up and walked to the edge of the deck, leaning over to look at the shoreline. "You know, I was talking to a developer buddy of mine. He says the market in Maple Cove is peaking. It is a bubble. Kayla, it is going to burst. If a person were smart, they would liquidate now, cash out, invest in something stable." "I am not interested in selling. Derek, we have talked about this." "We are not talking about selling," my mother interjected quickly, her voice high and soothing. "We are talking about diversifying, about security. We are a family. Kayla, we have to look out for each other. Your grandfather, well, he was a great man, but he was old-fashioned. He did not understand modern finance. He left you with a burden." "He left me a home," I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. Derek turned around, leaning his back against the railing. The sun was behind him, casting his face in shadow. "A home is where your family is. Kayla, it is not wood and nails. And right now, this home is dividing us. It is creating resentment. Not from us, of course, but people talk. They ask why the granddaughter got the lake house and the son got nothing. It puts your father in a tough spot." I looked at my father. He did not meet my gaze. He was busy peeling the label off his beer bottle. He was a man who had spent his life waiting for things to be handed to him, and he was angry that for the first time, the handout had skipped a generation. "I think," Derek continued, his voice dropping to that reasonable, businesslike tone that I loathed, "that we need to have a serious sit-down, not a party, a real conversation about the future, about how we can manage this asset in a way that benefits everyone. Logan here is looking at grad schools. Your parents are thinking about retirement. And you could be free of the headache." "I do not have a headache," I said. "You will," Derek said. It sounded like a threat. I looked around the circle. My mother, with her anxious, greedy eyes. My father, with his wounded entitlement. Logan, with his indifference fueled by the certainty that someone else would always pay his tab. And Derek, the architect of this misery. "Let's eat," I said, cutting the tension before it could explode. "The steaks are going to get cold." The rest of the evening was a blur of forced laughter and shallow conversation. I played the part of the dutiful daughter. I asked about Logan's girlfriend. I listened to my mother complain about her neighbors. I let my father tell the same fishing story he had told 100 times. But all the while, I was watching Derek. He did not relax. He spent the entire evening visually cataloging my possessions. I saw him looking at the vintage boat engine mounted on the wall. I saw him checking the brand of the new refrigerator I had installed 2 months ago. He was keeping a mental ledger. By 9 in the evening, they were packing up to leave. "Thanks for dinner, sweetie," Mom said, kissing my cheek. Her lips felt cold. "Think about what we said. We just want you to be happy." "We will be in touch," Derek said. He did not hug me. He shook my hand, his grip unnecessarily firm. "Soon." I watched their cars disappear down the long gravel driveway. the red taillights fading into the darkness of the pines. When the last sound of an engine faded away, silence reclaimed the property. The wind whispered through the trees, and the lake lapped gently against the shore. I locked the front door, then the back door, then I checked the windows. I went into the kitchen and started loading the dishwasher. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I felt like a soldier who had just survived a reconnaissance mission behind enemy lines. They had come to scout the territory. They had come to see if I was weak. My phone buzzed again on the counter. I dried my hands on a towel and picked it up. It was a text message from a group chat that included my parents, Logan and Derek. They had created the group chat 3 months ago, ostensibly to plan family events, but mostly to gang up on me. The message was from Derek. Meeting tomorrow at 10 in the morning, your place, asset talks. The family has agreed on the terms. Be ready. I stared at the screen. There was no question mark. There was no request for my availability. It was a summons. They were not coming to negotiate. They were coming to conquer. The family has agreed, I whispered to the empty kitchen. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. They had held a meeting without me, decided what to do with my property, and were now coming to deliver the verdict. They believed that because they outnumbered me 4-1, and because they were older, and because they were family, I would fold. They thought tomorrow would be a negotiation where they bullied me into submission. I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the height chart carved into the doorframe of the pantry, where my grandfather had marked my growth every summer since I was 5 years old. I looked at the heavy oak table where my grandmother used to roll out dough. They thought this was an asset. They thought this was a pile of money waiting to be distributed. I walked over to the drawer where I kept my grandfather's old files, now replaced by the crisp, new folders Mara had given me. I touched the cool paper. They were coming tomorrow to demand the house and the cars and everything else. They were coming to strip me bare. I turned off the kitchen light, plunging the room into darkness. "Come and get it," I said into the silence. Tomorrow was not going to be the victory lap they expected. They were walking into a room where the floor had already been removed, and they were too blinded by the shine of gold to notice the drop. I sat in the darkness of the kitchen for a long time after the screen of my phone went black. The silence of the house was not empty. It was filled with the echoes of 29 years of lessons I had learned the hard way. The text message from Derek was not a surprise. It was a mathematical inevitability. If I looked back at the trajectory of my life in this family, every single data point led to this exact moment. Growing up, I learned very quickly that in the Paul household, love was a finite resource, and the market was cornered by my younger brother, Logan. It started with small things, the kind of trivial injustices that children notice but adults dismiss as petty. When I was 8 years old and Logan was 5, he took a pair of scissors to the curtains in the living room. I remember watching him do it, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the destruction. When my mother found the shreds of fabric on the floor, she did not look at the scissors in Logan's hand. She looked at me. She asked why I had not stopped him. She asked why I was not watching him. She told me that a big sister takes responsibility. I was sent to my room without dinner, while Logan was cuddled on the sofa because the loud noise of her scolding had made him cry. That was the first lesson. Accountability in this house flowed upward to me, while credit flowed downward to him. By the time we were teenagers, the dynamic had calcified into a hard, undeniable rule. I worked summers at the local library to pay for my own school clothes. Logan spent his summers at camps that cost $3,000 a session, paid for without a second thought. When I brought home a report card with straight A's, my father would nod and say that was what was expected. When Logan managed to scrape a C- in remedial math, there was a celebration dinner at the steakhouse downtown because he had tried his best. I used to argue. I used to cry. I used to scream about how unfair it was until my throat was raw. But I realized somewhere around the age of 16 that my voice had no currency. My protests were just noise to them, easily tuned out. In fact, speaking up only made it worse. It gave them ammunition to call me difficult, ungrateful, or dramatic. Silence, I learned, was not about submission, it was about observation. If I stopped talking, I could start watching. And what I saw was that my parents were not just favoring Logan, they were investing in him like a volatile stock, convinced that if they just poured enough money and attention into him, he would eventually yield a return. I, on the other hand, was the savings bond they had forgotten in a drawer, steady, reliable, and utterly unexciting. There were only two people who saw the disparity and named it for what it was: my maternal grandparents, Arthur and Eleanor. They were the ones who had built this lake house. My grandfather was a man of few words, but immense precision. He had been a structural engineer, a man who understood that a single hairline fracture could bring down a skyscraper if left unattended. He saw the fractures in our family long before I did. I remember one afternoon when I was 19, I was home from college for the weekend, sitting on the dock with my grandfather. I was fuming because my parents had just asked me to withdraw $2,000 from my savings, money I had earned waiting tables, to help pay for Logan's legal fees after he had been caught destroying property at a party. They called it a family emergency. I called it theft. My grandfather was smoking his pipe, the sweet scent of tobacco drifting over the water. He watched me skip a stone across the surface of the lake. "You are angry," he stated. It was not a question. "I am tired of being the bank," I replied bitterly. "I am tired of being the backup plan." "Then stop," he said. I looked at him. "It is not that simple. They are family." He turned to me, his eyes sharp and clear behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Kayla, listen to me. Blood is a biological fact. Family is a behavior. If their behavior destroys you, they are not family. They are a hazard." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. He always carried it. "Do you know what is in here?" he asked. "Your notes?" "Facts," he corrected. "Dates, times, agreements. I write down everything, not because I do not trust people, but because people rewrite history to suit their needs. Memory is soft, ink is hard." He tapped the notebook against my knee. "Your parents, my daughter and her husband, they operate on emotion. They rewrite the narrative every morning to make themselves the heroes and you the villain or the servant. You cannot fight them with feelings. You fight them with paper." That afternoon, he took me into his study and showed me the filing cabinets. He showed me how to organize a deed, how to read a trust, and how to spot the loopholes in a contract. He taught me the difference between joint tenancy and tenants in common. He taught me that a verbal promise is worth exactly the paper it is written on, which is to say, nothing. "Assets reveal human nature," he told me, his finger tracing the line of a property map. "Put a pile of money on the table, and you will see who a person really is. Greed strips away the varnish of politeness. Remember that." I took his advice to heart. I became a hoarder of evidence. For the last 10 years, I have deleted nothing. Every time my mother texted me asking for money, I archived it. Every time my father emailed me promising to pay me back for a flight I booked for them, I saved it as a PDF. When Derek, my uncle, asked me to invest $5,000 in a sure-thing business venture that turned out to be a pyramid scheme, I kept the prospectus and his angry voicemails when I refused. I stopped arguing with them. When they asked for things, I started saying, "Send me an email with the details." They thought I was being bureaucratic or annoying. They rolled their eyes and called me uptight. But they sent the emails. They created the paper trail that proved, undeniably, that I was the one keeping them afloat, not the other way around. When my grandparents passed away, first my grandmother and then my grandfather 6 months later, the reading of the will was the first major earthquake. They left the bulk of their liquid assets to my mother and Derek, knowing they would burn through it within 5 years. But the house, the jewel, the sanctuary, the property at Maple Cove, they left entirely to me. I remember the look on Derek's face when the lawyer read that clause. It was not grief. It was the look of a man who had just realized his retirement plan had been canceled. My mother had wept, wailing about how her parents didn't trust her. They did not trust her, and they were right not to. Since that day, the pressure had been relentless. They treated my ownership of the house as a temporary mistake, a clerical error that I was morally obligated to correct. They made me feel guilty for having a sanctuary while Logan was bouncing between apartments he could not afford. They made me feel selfish for not selling it to fund their lifestyle creeps. But I had changed. I was no longer the 8-year-old girl accepting the blame for the cut curtains. I was the operation manager who knew that you do not negotiate with terrorists, even if they share your DNA. I stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the window. The reflection in the glass showed a woman who looked like her mother but stood like her grandfather. I had spent my childhood waiting for them to love me for who I was. I had spent my 20s waiting for them to appreciate what I did. I was done waiting. My grandfather was right. The house was not just a house. It was the pile of money on the table that stripped away the varnish. And tomorrow, when they walked through that door for the asset talks, they were going to find out that while they had been sharpening their knives, I had been building a fortress. I was not afraid of losing the family I never really had. I was only afraid of losing the one thing that proved I existed outside of their shadow. I went upstairs to my bedroom, opened my laptop, and logged into the secure cloud server where 10 years of receipts, recordings, and documents were stored. I scrolled through the folders. Folder: Logan's bail money, 2019. Folder: Mom's credit card debt payoff, 2021. Folder: Uncle Derek's solicitation, 2022. Folder: House maintenance costs, paid by Kayla, 2023 to 2025. I looked at the files and felt a cold, hard comfort. This was my armor. Family is not a safe harbor. For some of us, family is the storm, and I was finally the captain of my own ship. I closed the laptop, set my alarm for 7 in the morning, and went to sleep with the calm of a woman who knows exactly where the bodies are buried because she is the one who dug the graves. The silence that followed the reading of my grandparents' will 8 months ago was not the silence of grief. It was the silence of calculation. My mother and Derek had received liquid cash, $50,000 each, which they viewed as an insult. I had received the deed to the property at Maple Cove, which they viewed as a liability. At the time, the house was old, the roof needed work, and the property taxes were creeping up. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and relief, thinking I had been saddled with a white elephant while they walked away with free money. They burned through their $50,000 in less than 6 months. My mother remodeled her kitchen, and Derek bought a boat that he parked in a marina he could not afford. Meanwhile, I fixed the roof and paid the taxes. Then, the rumors started. It began as a whisper in the local coffee shop in town. Then a speculative article in the County Gazette. A massive hospitality group was scouting locations for a high-end eco-resort. They were not looking at the crowded southern shore of the lake. They were looking north, exactly where my property sat on 4 acres of pristine, wooded waterfront. Overnight, the narrative changed. The burden became a gold mine. The money pit became a winning lottery ticket. I watched the transformation of my family's attitude in real time, like watching a predator adjust its stance before a strike. The phone calls from Derek became frequent. He stopped asking how I was and started asking about zoning laws. He started sending me articles about the real estate boom in Wisconsin, circling paragraphs about peak market value in red ink, as if I were illiterate. "You are sitting on a fortune, Kayla," he told me over the phone 3 weeks ago. "But land is tricky. If you miss the window, you are left with dirt. We need to be smart about this." Notice the pronoun shift. It was no longer my house. It was our opportunity. We need to be smart. My parents took a different approach. They did not talk about the market. They talked about survival. They came over for dinner one Sunday and spent the entire meal sighing about the cost of living. My father pushed his peas around his plate and talked about his bad back, about how he could not keep working at the warehouse forever, about how retirement was looking like a pipe dream. "It keeps me up at night," my mother added, looking at me with watery, pleading eyes. "Thinking about Logan. He is struggling. Kayla, he wants to start that landscaping business, But he has no capital. Banks won't touch him. He has a credit score of 400, Mom, I said, cutting a piece of chicken. That is why banks won't touch him. He just needs a chance, she insisted. He needs a family that backs him. You are so lucky. Kayla, you have this steady job, no kids, and now this asset. It feels unbalanced, doesn't it? That one child has so much and the other has nothing? There it was, the moral argument, to them. My stability was not the result of discipline. It was a hoarding of luck that I was obligated to redistribute. The pressure intensified when the rumor became a concrete reality. A surveyor was spotted on the neighboring lot. Property values in Maple Cove didn't just climb, they exploded. My 4 acres, previously assessed at $300,000, were suddenly being whispered about in the range of $1.2 million. That number, $1.2 million, poisoned everything. Logan, who had never picked up a rake in his life, suddenly started talking about the kind of truck he would buy for his landscaping business. A Ford F-350, lifted, custom rims. He talked about it as if the money were already in his bank account. He stopped applying for jobs because he was waiting for the inheritance to settle. He genuinely believed that the sale of my house was a foregone conclusion, a mere administrative hurdle before his payout. Then came the invitation to the asset talks. Derek sent an email, copying my parents and a man named Robert Gantry. The subject line was formal. Strategic planning meeting regarding Maple Cove Estate. Kayla. The email read, I have taken the liberty of engaging a financial consultant, Mr. Gantry, to help us navigate the complexities of the current market. He has extensive experience in estate liquidation and family trusts. We have scheduled a session to discuss the equitable distribution of the asset and to finalize the sale strategy. We need to move fast before the developers look elsewhere. See you Sunday. They did not ask if I wanted to sell. They did not ask if I was free on Sunday. They simply informed me that the machinery of liquidation had been turned on. I stared at the name Robert Gantry. It sounded impressive. Financial consultant. Estate specialist. I did what my grandfather would have done. I dug. I spent 3 hours that night running a background check on Robert Gantry. It cost me $40 to access the public records, and it was worth every penny. Gantry was not a fiduciary. He was not a certified financial planner. He was a real estate broker whose license had been suspended twice for ethics violations in 2018. He currently ran a firm called Gantry Wealth Solutions, which operated out of a strip mall next to a vape shop in the next county over. More importantly, a deep dive into his social media revealed a photo from 1995. It was a high school football team photo. Standing in the back row, arms around each other, were a young Robert Gantry and a young Derek Paul. They were high school buddies. This was not a professional consultation. This was a hustle. Derek had brought in a crony to use big words and scare tactics to bully me into signing a power of attorney or a listing agreement. They were going to sandwich me between expert advice and parental pressure. Gantry would say the market was volatile and I needed to sell now. My parents would say that holding on to the property was selfish when the family was in need. Derek would present the paperwork as the only logical solution. I printed out Gantry's suspended license record. I printed out the photo of him and Derek. I printed out the Zillow estimate of Gantry's own home, which was currently in pre-foreclosure. I placed the papers in a folder, but I did not call them out. I did not reply to the email with a refusal. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. You want a meeting? Let's have a meeting. I realized then that if I refused to show up, they would just keep coming. They would harass me, guilt me, and maybe even try to sue me for some made-up claim on the estate. The only way to stop a shark is not to swim away. It is to show them that you are not seal meat. You are a naval mine. I picked up the phone and called Mara Ellison, my actual attorney. She was a woman who charged $400 an hour and wore suits that cost more than Logan's imaginary truck. They scheduled the talk, I told her. Date and time? Mara asked. Her voice was crisp, like turning a page in a new book. Sunday, 10 in the morning. Who is the opposition? My family and a guy named Robert Gantry, a broker posing as an advisor, Derek's friend. I heard the sound of typing on the other end of the line. Standard intimidation tactic. They want to corner you. Do they know about the trust? No. They think the deed is still in my name. They think I am vulnerable. Good, Mara said. Let them think that if they knew the asset was already moved, they wouldn't show up, and we wouldn't be able to get them on record. You need them to commit. Kayla, you need them to explicitly demand the assets and present their fraudulent paperwork. Once they do that, we have them for conspiracy to defraud. So I just sit there and let them strip me apart? You sit there and let them dig their own grave, Mara corrected. I will be parked down the street. When you give the signal, I come in. I hung up the phone. My hands were cold, but my mind was clear. The realization hit me hard. This was not an intervention. This was not a family dispute. This was a hostile takeover. They viewed me as a holding company, and they were the board of directors voting to liquidate the subsidiary. They did not care about my memories of this house. They did not care that this was the only place I felt safe. To them, I was just an obstacle standing between them and a wire transfer. My father's talk about family responsibility was a lie. My mother's tears were a weapon. Derek's advice was a trap. I looked at the email again. Strategic planning meeting. They wanted to talk about assets? Fine, we would talk about assets, but they were forgetting the most important rule of business, the one my grandfather taught me when I was 12 years old, and trying to sell lemonade on a rainy day. Never negotiate with someone who thinks they own you. I marked the date on my calendar. Sunday, 10 o'clock. I would bake a coffee cake. I would brew fresh coffee. I would put out the nice napkins. And when they sat down to devour me, they would choke. The office of Ellison & Partners was located on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Milwaukee. It was a place designed to intimidate. The carpet was thick enough to silence footsteps. The conference table was a slab of polished black marble that looked like a tombstone, and the view from the window reduced the chaotic city below to a silent, manageable grid. I sat across from Mara Ellison 3 days before the scheduled asset talk. Mara was 60 years old, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that had seen every variation of human greed imaginable. She did not offer me tea or sympathy. She offered me a strategy. You understand the vulnerability of your position, Mara said, her voice dry and precise. She placed a single sheet of paper on the marble table between us. As long as that deed has your name on it, Kayla Paul, you are a target. Your family sees you as a soft obstacle. They believe that with enough pressure, enough guilt, or enough screaming, you will break. And statistically speaking, they are usually right. Most people break. I won't break, I said, though my hands were clasped tightly in my lap to hide a slight tremor. Intentions are irrelevant in court, Mara countered. Systems are what matter. Right now, you own the asset fee simple. That means if your uncle coerces you into signing a quitclaim deed on Sunday, or if your brother drives a truck through a storefront and sues you for his share of the family estate, the property is exposed. We need to remove the human element. She slid a thick binder toward me. We are going to execute what is known as a scorched earth defense, but instead of burning the land, we are going to bury it in a bunker so deep they will need a subpoena from God to touch it. I opened the binder. The legal jargon was dense, but Mara translated it with brutal efficiency. Step 1, she said, tapping the first document. We create an irrevocable trust. This is not a standard living trust that you can change whenever you feel like it. This is permanent. Once you sign this property into the trust, you, Kayla Paul, technically no longer own it. The trust owns it. You are the beneficiary, but you are not the owner on public record. And the trustee? I asked. I will serve as the administrative trustee, Mara said, which means even if you wanted to sell the house to your uncle next week because you felt bad for him, you couldn't. I would have to approve it. And as your fiduciary, legally bound to protect the asset, I would refuse. You can tell your family, truthfully, that your hands are tied. That sounds severe, I admitted. It is, she agreed, but we are going a step further. The trust will not just hold the house directly. The trust will own 100% of a limited liability company. We are filing the papers today for Maple Cove Legacy Management, LLC. The deed to the house will be transferred from you to the LLC. The LLC is then owned by the trust. I looked at the diagram she had drawn. It was a fortress. Why the LLC? I asked. Because, Mara said, leaning forward, if your brother or your uncle tries to sue you personally for some imagined debt or family obligation, they cannot touch the assets inside the LLC. If they sue the LLC, they have to prove the business did something wrong, which it won't, because it does nothing but hold a house. It is a dead end, a black hole for litigation. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy. I realized that by signing these papers, I was doing something irreversible. I was effectively ending my ownership of the only place I loved, handing it over to a legal entity to save it, but I also knew that if I did not do this, Derek and his predatory broker friend would find a way to take it. Do it, I said. The next hour was a blur of administrative violence. A notary was brought in, a stern woman who stamped documents with a rhythmic, percussive thud that sounded like gunshots. I signed my name over and over again, with every signature. I felt a layer of my old self peeling away. The dutiful daughter, the pushover sister, the niece who just wanted to keep the peace. She was dying in this room. When the final document was notarized, Mara took the file. I will have my clerk file the deed transfer at the county recorder's office electronically within the hour. By 5 o'clock this afternoon, the public record will show that Kayla Paul owns nothing in Maple Cove. And they won't know? Not unless they check the registry between 5 o'clock today and 10 o'clock Sunday morning, Mara said. And people like your Uncle Derek are lazy. He did his research weeks ago. He assumes the battlefield hasn't changed. He is walking into an ambush. Mara then pulled up a screen on her laptop. Now, for the defensive perimeter, I am activating a title monitoring service on the property. If anyone tries to file a lien, a mortgage, or a new deed against this property, I get an alert on my phone within minutes. You think they would go that far? I asked. Forgery? Mara looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Your uncle is desperate. Your father feels entitled. Your brother is reckless, desperate, entitled. Reckless people do not follow the law. They rewrite it in their heads until a crime feels like justice. If they cannot bully you into signing, they might try to sign for you. I have seen it happen in families with far less money at stake than $1.2 million. She typed a few commands and hit enter. The alert is active. If Derek tries to slide a piece of paper across a clerk's desk in the county courthouse, we will know before the ink is dry. I stood up to leave, feeling lightheaded. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the office. One last thing. Kayla, Mara said, stopping me at the door. Her tone had softened, just a fraction. What we did today is legal. It is financial, but the consequences will be personal. When you drop this hammer on Sunday, you are not just winning a negotiation. You are severing a limb. They will never forgive you for outsmarting them. I thought about the family dinners where I was ignored. I thought about the way my mother looked at Logan with adoration and at me with expectation. I thought about the way Derek had appraised my walls like he was stripping a car for parts. I know, I said. I am not looking for forgiveness. I am looking for freedom. Then you have it, Mara said. Go home. Don't answer their calls. Don't engage with their texts. Let them simmer. I will see you on Sunday. I drove home in silence. When I pulled into the driveway of the lake house, it looked different. Technically, it was no longer mine. It belonged to Maple Cove Legacy Management, LLC. But as I unlocked the front door and stepped into the cool, quiet hallway, I felt a sense of ownership more profound than any deed could convey. I had protected it. I had built a wall around my sanctuary that they could not climb, could not breach, and could not bribe their way through. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. Dad is so stressed about the meeting. Please be reasonable on Sunday. Remember who raised you. I looked at the message and felt a strange detachment. a week ago. That text would have sent me into a spiral of guilt. I would have agonized over how to explain myself, how to soften the blow. Now, I just saw it for what it was. A probe, a test of the perimeter defenses. I did not reply. I deleted the thread. I walked through the house, turning on the lights one by one. In the living room, I stood in the spot where the asset talk would take place. I imagined them sitting there. Derek with his fake broker. My parents with their rehearsed speeches. Logan with his entitlement. They were coming to take everything. They were coming to evict me from my own life. I went to the front door and threw the deadbolt. Click. The sound echoed through the empty house. It was a heavy, final sound. They thought the door was open. They thought they were walking into a house of cards that they could blow down with a little bit of bluster. They had no idea that while they were busy counting their chickens, I had turned the house into a bank vault and swallowed the key. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat in the dark, watching the moonlight dance on the water. I was alone. I would likely be alone for a long time after Sunday, but as I took a sip of the wine, I realized that loneliness was a small price to pay for safety. The trap was set, the paperwork was filed, the LLC was alive. I raised my glass to the empty room. "Welcome to Maple Cove Legacy Management," I whispered. "Trespassers will be prosecuted." 2 days before the scheduled asset talks, my family insisted on a dinner. They called it a pre-weekend gather, a phrase my mother had invented to make an ambush sound like a picnic. They wanted to come to the lake house on Friday night. I knew exactly why. It was the softening up phase. In any hostile negotiation, you do not just walk in and demand the surrender. You buy the victim a meal first. You smile. You remind them of the shared history. You make it harder for them to say no because they are full of your roast chicken and your guilt. I agreed to host. I spent the afternoon cooking a pot roast, the smell of thyme and onions filling the kitchen. It was the same meal my grandmother used to make on Sundays. The scent was nostalgic for me, but for them, I knew it would just be background noise to the business at hand. They arrived in a convoy, my parents in their aging sedan, and Derek in his leased luxury SUV. Logan rode with Derek, stepping out of the passenger seat wearing a baseball cap backward and looking around the property with a proprietary air. "Place looks good, Kay," Logan said as he walked into the kitchen, grabbing a roll from the basket before I had even set the table. "Grass is getting a little long by the boathouse, though. You need to get on that. Curb appeal is everything right now." "Hello to you too, Logan," I said. "I am just saying." He shrugged, chewing with his mouth open. "If we are going to list it, it needs to be pristine. First impressions are money." "We are not listing it," I said, keeping my voice even. "We will talk about that on Sunday," Derek said, breezing through the door with a bottle of wine that I recognized from the bottom shelf of the gas station down the road. He placed it on the counter as if it were a vintage Bordeaux. "Tonight is just family time. No business tonight. Right, everyone?" He winked at me. It was a conspiratorial wink, the kind a car salesman gives you right before he sells you the undercoating you do not need. We sat down to eat. The dining room faced the lake, and the view was spectacular. The moon was rising, casting a silver path across the black water, but no one looked out the window. Their eyes were fixed on the interior. My mother started the offensive. She did not attack. She lamented. "It is so hard these days," she sighed, cutting a piece of potato. "I was talking to Aunt Carol yesterday. Her son just bought a house, a beautiful place in the suburbs. He is 25. I felt so happy for him, but it hurts, you know? Knowing that Logan is still sleeping on a futon, it just feels like we failed him." She looked at me. The implication was clear. "We did not fail him. You are failing him." "I am working on it, Mom," Logan said, reaching for the butter. "Once I get the capital for the equipment, the landscaping business is going to take off. I have a vision. I just need the seed money. And a truck. You can't show up to a job site in a Honda Civic." "Exactly," my father said, nodding solemnly. "You need tools to build a life. And right now, all the tools are locked up in in non-liquid assets. He gestured vaguely around the room with his fork. "This house is too big for one person anyway," Derek chimed in. His voice was smooth, practiced. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the cheap wine in his glass. "It is selfish, really. Not that you are selfish, Kayla, but the situation is selfish. You have 4 bedrooms here. You use 1. Meanwhile, the market is screaming for inventory. Holding on to this place is not just bad economics, it is bad stewardship. Grandpa would not want his legacy to be a museum. He would want it to be a launch pad for the next generation." I gripped my fork tighter. Grandpa built this house with his own hands. Derek, he didn't build a launch pad, he built a home. "Things change," Derek said dismissively. "Sentimentality is expensive. We have to be pragmatic. Think about what we could do with $1.2 million. Mom and Dad could retire comfortably. No more worrying about heating bills. Logan gets his start. I could finally pay off. Well, invest in some new ventures. And you, Kayla, you would walk away with a nice chunk. You could buy a condo in the city, something modern, low maintenance, no more fixing roofs." "I like fixing the roof," I said. They all laughed. It was a dry, patronizing sound. "Oh, honey," my mother said, reaching over to pat my hand. "You say that now, but you are a young woman. You should be traveling. You should be dating. You shouldn't be tied down to a lumber pile in the woods. We are trying to set you free." "Free," I repeated. "Yes," my father said. "We are a family. We rise and fall together. Right now, you are sitting on the lifeboat while the rest of us are treading water. We are just asking you to let us in." I looked around the table. I looked at their faces. There was no warmth there. There was only hunger. They looked at me and saw an ATM machine that had lost its PIN code, and they were trying to guess the numbers. I decided to ask the question that had been burning in my mind since the will was read. I needed to hear the answer, just to be absolutely sure. "If the market crashed tomorrow," I said quietly, interrupting Logan's monologue about the specifications of a Ford F-350, "if the developers pulled out and the rumors died, and this house was suddenly worth only $200,000 again, would you still want it? Would you still want to hold on to it for the family?" The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Fork clinking against china stopped. Chewing stopped. Derek blinked. He looked at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "That is a hypothetical that does not matter," Derek said quickly. "The reality is that it is worth over $1 million. "But if it wasn't," I pressed, "if it was just the house, just the memories, just the place where we spent every Christmas, would you want it then? Would you want to keep it so Logan could bring his kids here one day? Or would you just be angry that you couldn't sell it?" My father cleared his throat. "Kayla, be realistic. No one keeps a property that is a drain on resources. If it wasn't worth anything, why would we keep it? The taxes alone are a nightmare." "So it is not about the legacy," I said. "It is just about the check." "It is about value," Derek corrected sharply, his tone losing its friendly veneer for a split second. "Value is what matters, and right now, you are holding the value hostage." My mother sighed again, louder this time. "Why do you have to be so dramatic, Kayla? Why do you have to make everything a test? We love this house, but we love our family more, and right now, the family needs the money. The house is just wood. You can't eat wood. You can't pay medical bills with wood." "Okay," I said. I said it softly. Derek's ears perked up. "Okay? Okay what?" "Okay," I repeated. "I understand where you are coming from." I did not say I agreed. I did not say I would sell. I simply acknowledged their position. But they heard what they wanted to hear. The tension in the room broke instantly. Shoulders dropped. Smiles returned. Logan pumped his fist in the air. "Finally," Logan said. "Man, I was worried you were going to be a nightmare about this. I already looked at the truck online. It is pearl white, leather interior." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Derek said, though he was grinning. "But this is good. This is very good. Kayla, You are making the rational choice. You are growing up. So, Sunday, Derek continued, pulling out his phone to check the time. 10 o'clock sharp. Robert Gantry will be here with the paperwork. We will need to go over the listing agreement, the power of attorney for the sale, and the distribution plan. I have drafted a preliminary split, 40% to the parents, 20 to Logan, 20 to me for managing the sale and the trust, and 20 to you. It is fair. Since you didn't pay for the house, it is all profit for you anyway. 20%. They were offering me 20% of my own property, and Derek was taking 20% just for managing the theft. I looked at him. I looked at the grease on his chin from the pot roast I had cooked. Sunday at 10, I said. Bring Mr. Gantry. Bring the paperwork. I will be here. That is my girl, my father said, raising his glass. To family. To family, Derek echoed. To the truck, Logan mumbled, his mouth full of bread. I raised my glass of water. To getting what we deserve, I said. They drank, thinking I was toasting their victory. They did not understand that I was toasting their judgment day. The rest of the dinner was a blur of them spending the money they did not have. They talked about vacations. They talked about new cars. My mother talked about getting professional landscaping for her garden. They carved up my life like a turkey, passing the pieces around the table, never once asking if I was hungry. When they finally left, the relief was physical. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening to the silence of the house. They had failed the test. I had given them one last chance to show that they cared about the home, about the history, about me. They had chosen the money. They had confirmed, explicitly and without shame, that if the house had no monetary value, they would discard it without a second thought. I walked into the living room and looked at the fireplace. I thought about the asset talks on Sunday. Derek thought he was coming to a surrender ceremony. He thought he was going to walk in, slide a pen across the table, and walk out with $1 million. I went to the drawer where I had hidden the folder from Mara Ellison. The folder contained the filed deed transfer to Maple Cove Legacy Management, LLC. It contained the trust documents. It contained the proof that Kayla Paul owned absolutely nothing for them to take. I felt a cold, sharp smile touch my lips. Sunday, I whispered. I was not the victim anymore. I was the executioner, and I had just served them their last meal. Sunday morning arrived with a sky so blue it felt like an insult. The weather outside was perfect for a boat ride or a hike, but inside my living room, the air was stagnant, smelling of stale coffee and aggressive cologne. At 10 o'clock sharp, the invasion force assembled. My parents sat on the sofa, clutching mugs of coffee like they were waiting for a verdict in a hospital waiting room. Logan was pacing by the fireplace, checking his phone, likely looking at accessories for the truck he had not bought yet. Derek sat at the head of the dining table, which he had commandeered as his command center. Next to him sat Robert Gantry. Gantry was exactly what I expected from the background check. He wore a suit that was slightly too shiny and a watch that was too big for his wrist. He had a briefcase open in front of him, filled with papers that had colorful sticky notes on the edges. He looked like a man playing the role of a financial expert in a low-budget commercial. "Let us get started," Derek said, clapping his hands together. "We have a lot to get through, and Robert has a tea time at 2. I sat at the opposite end of the table. I had no papers. I had no lawyer present. To them, I looked defenseless. "Kayla," Gantry began, his voice oily and rehearsed. "I have reviewed the portfolio regarding the Maple Cove estate. I have to be honest with you. Your position is precarious. The market is overheating. We are looking at a correction within the next quarter. If you hold on to this property, you are looking at a potential loss of 40% in equity. That is not just bad luck. That is financial negligence." He slid a graph across the table. The red line went down. It was generic clip art. I did not even look at it. "Cut the chase, Robert," Derek interrupted. "She does not need the lecture. She needs the solution." Derek pulled a thick stack of documents from his own briefcase and slammed them onto the table. The sound echoed like a gavel. "Here is the deal," Derek said. We are not doing the 20% split I mentioned on Friday. We talked about it last night, and frankly, that was too generous considering the risk we are taking on. My father shifted on the sofa but did not make eye contact. My mother stared into her coffee mug. The new deal, Derek said, is a total liquidation transfer. You sign over the deed to the house, the 4 acres of land, the detached garage, and the contents therein to the Paul Family Trust, which I will administer. In exchange, the trust will pay off any outstanding debts you have associated with the property upkeep, and we will give you a cash stipend of $10,000 for your relocation. 10,000, I repeated. The property is valued at $1.2 million. The land is valued at that, Derek corrected. The house is a teardown, and you are forgetting the emotional cost you have inflicted on this family. You have held this asset hostage for 3 years. You have denied your parents their retirement security. You have blocked Logan from his potential. That 10,000 is a gift. Kayla, we should be charging you for the stress. And the cars, Logan piped up from the fireplace. Don't forget the cars. Right, Derek added, not missing a beat. The Grand Wagoneer in the garage, and your personal vehicle, the SUV, since you won't have a house to park them at, and you will be moving to the city. You won't need them. The trust will absorb those assets as well. You want my car? I asked. The one I bought with my own salary? It is parked on family land, Derek said, as if that explained everything. It is part of the package. We want a clean break. Kayla, total severance. You walk away with $10,000 and a clear conscience. We handle the burden of the wealth. My mother finally spoke up, her voice trembling with that weaponized fragility she had perfected. It is for the best. Kayla, you are not cut out for this. You are too emotional. You hold on to things too tight. We are just trying to help you let go. Don't look at us like we are the bad guys. We are saving you from yourself. You are selfish, my father added, his voice low and angry. You have always been selfish, sitting out here like a queen while your brother struggles. Do you know how that makes me look? To have one rich child and one poor child? It is embarrassing. You are humiliating us. The accusations flew across the room like darts. Selfish, emotional, incompetent, embarrassing. They were not negotiating. They were stripping me. They wanted the house. They wanted the land. They wanted my grandfather's vintage Jeep. They even wanted the car I drove to work. They wanted to leave me with nothing but a check that wouldn't even cover a security deposit on a studio apartment. I looked at Logan. He was smirking. He was already driving that Ford F-350 in his mind. I looked at Derek. He was leaning forward, his eyes glittering with greed. He had the pen in his hand, ready to thrust it at me. So, Derek said, sliding the stack of papers across the polished wood. Sign, quitclaim deed, title transfer, power of attorney, sign it all, and you can leave. We will even help you pack a bag. I looked at the stack of papers. It was thick. It represented the total erasure of my life in Maple Cove. The room went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. They were all holding their breath, waiting for the fight. They expected me to scream. They expected me to cry. They expected me to throw the papers in Derek's face and order them to leave. I reached out and placed my hand on the paperwork. The paper felt cool under my palm. I looked at Derek. I looked at my parents. I looked at Logan. I let my gaze linger on each of them for a full 5 seconds, ensuring they saw the absolute clarity in my eyes. Okay, I said. My voice was steady. No waver, no tears. What? Derek asked, blinking. I said okay, I repeated, louder this time. You are right. It is too much responsibility. I am tired of fighting you. I am tired of being the villain in your story. If you want the house, the land, the cars, and the burden that comes with them, fine. I pushed the papers back toward him slightly, just to adjust the angle. Give it all to them, I said. Right now, I am done. The reaction was instantaneous. My mother let out a sob of relief. Oh, thank God. Kayla, you are finally seeing reason. Logan pumped his fist. Yes, I told you she would fold. Derek let out a long, loud breath, his shoulders dropping 2 inches. A grin spread across his face, revealing his coffee-stained teeth. He looked at Gantry and nodded. "See? I told you. It just takes a little firmness." "Smart move, Kayla," Gantry said, uncapping a pen. "Very smart. You are dodging a bullet with the market the way it is." "Where do I sign?" I asked. Derek practically scrambled over the table to flip the document to the signature page. "Here, and here, an initial here." He shoved the pen into my hand. I held the pen over the paper. The tip hovered millimeters above the line. "Wait," I said. The room froze. Derek's smile twitched. What is it?" "This is a major transfer," I said. "We are talking about over $1 million in assets. My car, the Wagoneer, the land." "So?" Derek snapped. "You said you were done." "I am," I said calmly. "But if I am giving you everything, absolutely everything, I want it to be airtight. I do not want you coming back to me in 6 months saying I missed a form. I do not want the county rejecting the filing because of a technicality. I want this to be final." "It is final," Derek insisted. "Robert is a witness." "Robert is your friend," I said. "And his license is for real estate, not legal verification. I want a notary, a real, independent, third-party notary public to witness my signature and stamp these documents. Today, right now, in this room." Derek looked at Gantry. Gantry looked at Derek. "We don't need a notary for the preliminary agreement," Gantry said. "We can notarize the deed later." "No," I said, setting the pen down. "I sign nothing without a notary present. If I am handing over my inheritance, I want a court-recognized official to witness that I did it voluntarily. It protects me. But mostly, Derek, it protects you. It proves I cannot come back later and claim you forced me." I saw the gears turning in Derek's head. He was greedy, but he was also paranoid. The idea that I might sue him later for coercion had definitely crossed his mind. Having a notary witness the signing would make the theft look completely legitimate. It would be his shield. "She is right," Gantry whispered to Derek. "If she challenges this later, a notarized signature is bulletproof. It cements the deal." Derek looked at me. He saw only surrender in my face. He saw a beaten woman trying to salvage a shred of dignity by following procedure. "Fine," Derek said. "You want a notary? We will get a notary. I don't want any excuses when they get here." "No excuses," I promised. "I just want to sign and leave." Derek pulled out his phone. "I know a mobile notary service. They work Sundays. I will pay the rush fee." He made the call, his voice booming with authority. "Yes, immediate service, Maple Cove, a full estate transfer. Yes, bring the embosser. We need the seal." He hung up and looked at me with a smirk that was pure triumph. "He will be here in 45 minutes. Do not move." "I am not going anywhere," I said. "I will make some more coffee." I stood up and walked to the kitchen. Behind me, the room erupted in hushed, excited whispers. "Did you hear that?" Logan whispered. "Everything. She said everything." "We can list it by Tuesday," Gantry murmured. "I need to call the bank," my father said. I turned on the coffee grinder. The loud mechanical whir drowned out their voices for a moment. I watched the beans being crushed into dust. They thought they had won. They thought my demand for a notary was the last gasp of a control freak. They did not understand that I was not bringing in a witness to validate their victory. I was bringing in a witness to document their folly. I needed the notary because what was about to happen had to be on the public record. I needed an independent observer to testify that I, Kayla Paul, had willingly signed the papers they put in front of me. Because when the truth came out, when they tried to cash the check that I was about to write them, I needed the world to know that I had given them exactly what they asked for. I walked back into the living room with the coffee pot. 40 minutes, Derek said, drumming his fingers on the table. "And then you are history." "I know," I said, pouring him a cup. "I can't wait." And I meant it. The trap was not just set. The jaws were open, and they had just walked right into the throat of it. The arrival of the notary was punctual, precise, and devoid of emotion. Everything my family was not. His name was Mr. Abernathy. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and a briefcase that looked like it had survived 3 decades of legal battles. He smelled of mints and old paper. When he walked into the living room, the atmosphere shifted. Derek straightened his tie. Robert Gantry closed his folder of generic graphs. My parents sat up straighter on the sofa, trying to look like the respectable beneficiaries of a generous gift rather than vultures picking at a carcass. I understand there is a quitclaim deed and a power of attorney to be notarized, Mr. Abernathy said, his voice thin and reedy. He did not smile. He placed a portable embosser on the dining table with a heavy thud. Yes, Derek said, his voice booming with forced conviviality. We have everything ready. Standard family transfer. My niece is moving to the city, and we are taking over the estate management. Just need a witness to the signatures so we can file with the county tomorrow. Identification, please, Mr. Abernathy said, looking at me. I pulled my driver's license from my back pocket and slid it across the table. He picked it up, adjusted his glasses, and scrutinized it against my face. He took his time. I saw Derek tapping his foot rhythmically against the leg of the table, a nervous tic he had never quite outgrown. Kayla Marie Paul, Mr. Abernathy read. Expiration date is valid. Very good. He pulled a logbook from his bag. Please sign the logbook, Ms. Paul, and thumbprint here. I did as I was asked. I pressed my thumb into the ink pad and rolled it onto the page. The black ink stained my skin. It felt like booking into a prison, or perhaps booking out of one. Now, Mr. Abernathy said, turning to the stack of documents Derek had prepared, he picked up the quit-claim deed. He read the header. Grantor, Kayla Marie Paul. Grantee, the Paul Family Trust. Property description, 142 Lakeview Drive, Maple Cove, Wisconsin, along with all structures and improvements. He paused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a smartphone. What are you doing? Derek asked, his patience fraying. The papers are standard. I had a lawyer draft them. I am a notary. Sir. Not a rubber stamp. Mr. Abernathy said without looking up. For real estate transfers of this value, it is my policy to verify the parcel number and current vesting with the county assessor's public portal. It takes 30 seconds. It prevents complications. The room went silent. I saw Gantry shift in his seat. He knew. Any real estate professional knew that a quick title check was standard diligence. But he had assumed a mobile notary would be lazy. Mr. Abernathy tapped on his screen. He squinted. He tapped again. Then he frowned. He looked at the deed in his hand. Then he looked at his phone. Then he looked at me. Ms. Paul, Mr. Abernathy said, his voice confused. You are attempting to grant this property to the Paul Family Trust? Yes, I said calmly. That is what they asked me to do. I am signing over my house. But you cannot grant this property, Mr. Abernathy said. He set the paper down as if it were contaminated. You do not own it. The air left the room. What? Derek barked. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the wood floor. Of course she owns it. My father left it to her. She has lived here for 3 years. Don't be ridiculous. Just stamp the damn paper. Sir, I cannot notarize a signature on a deed where the grantor has no legal standing, Mr. Abernathy said, his voice hardening. He turned his phone screen toward Derek. According to the county recorder's office, as of last Friday afternoon, the title to 142 Lakeview Drive is held by an entity called Maple Cove Legacy Management, LLC. Derek froze. He stared at the small screen. That is a mistake, Derek stammered. The county database must be lagging. She owns it. Kayla, tell him you own it. I stayed seated. I crossed my hands in my lap. I looked at Derek, then at my parents, whose faces had gone pale. Mr. Abernathy is correct, I said. I do not own the house, or the land, or the garage." "What did you do?" Derek whispered. The color was draining from his face, replaced by a blotchy red rage. "I gave it away," I said. "Just like you wanted. I realized the burden was too heavy for me personally, so I transferred the ownership." "To who?" my mother shrieked. "Who did you sell it to?" "I didn't sell it," I said. "I transferred it to a limited liability company, a corporate entity." "Well, who owns the company?" Gantry asked. His voice was tight, high-pitched. He was smelling the smoke of a burning deal. "A trust," I said. "An irrevocable trust." Derek slammed his hand on the table. "Then sign as the manager. Sign as the trustee. I don't care what the name is. Just sign the property over." "I can't," I said softly. "That is the beauty of an irrevocable trust. Derek, I am not the trustee. I have no administrative power. I cannot sell, transfer, or encumber the asset without the written consent of the independent trustee." "Who is the trustee?" Derek demanded. "Mara Ellison," I said. "You might know the firm, Ellison and Partners. They are very thorough." Derek looked like he had been slapped. He knew the name. Everyone in the state who dealt with high-end litigation knew the name. Mara Ellison was a shark who ate other sharks for breakfast. "So," I continued, picking up the pen Derek had forced on me earlier, "I am still willing to sign this quitclaim deed. Derek, I promised I would give you everything I own. Kayla Paul, am happy to sign over all my personal rights to this property, but since I own 0% of it, you will be receiving exactly 0% of it." I looked at the notary. "Mr. Abernathy, can I sign a document giving away rights I do not possess?" "You can sign it," Mr. Abernathy said, snapping his logbook shut. "But it would be a worthless piece of paper. It would have no legal force. It would be like me signing a deed giving you the Brooklyn Bridge." "There you have it," I said to the room. "I am ready to sign. I am ready to give you everything that belongs to Kayla Paul. But Kayla Paul is a tenant here. I own my clothes. I own my laptop. Do you want those?" Gantry stood up. He grabbed his briefcase. "I am leaving," Gantry said. "Sit down, Robert," Derek yelled. "No, Derek," Gantry snapped back. "This is fraud. If she transferred the title to an LLC to avoid a sale she knew was coming, that is one thing, but you brought me here to facilitate a transfer of assets that don't exist. If Ellison is involved, I am not touching this. I have a license to protect." Gantry did not wait for a response. He bolted for the door, not even looking back. The sound of his car engine revving in the driveway seconds later was the sound of a rat abandoning a sinking ship. Mr. Abernathy stood up as well. "I believe my services are not required. There is a $50 trip fee. I will invoice you." He walked out with dignity, leaving the front door slightly ajar. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. My family looked at me, and for the first time, they did not see the doormat. They saw the lock. Logan was the first to speak. He was sitting on the hearth of the fireplace, his phone dangling from his hand. He looked at me, really looked at me, with a mixture of confusion and fear. "You played us," Logan said. His voice was quiet. "You let us come here. You let us talk about the money. You let me look at trucks. And you knew the whole time." "Yes," I said. "Why?" my mother asked. She was crying now, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration. "Why would you be so cruel? We are your family." "Because you didn't ask," I said. "You commanded. You assumed. You tried to bully me. If you had come to me 6 months ago and asked for help, maybe we could have worked something out. But you didn't want help. You wanted a harvest. You wanted to cut me down and sell the wood." "It is still family property," my father shouted. "You can't just lock it away in some company." "It is not family property," I corrected him. "It is Maple Cove Legacy Management property, and the bylaws of the LLC are very specific. The property is to be maintained as a residence for the beneficiary. No sale, no liquidation, no leverage." Derek had been standing by the window, staring out at the driveway where Gantry had fled. He turned around slowly. His face was no longer red. It was a pale, icy white. The rage had cooled into something much more dangerous. He walked back to the table and picked up the unsigned deed. He crumpled it in his fist. "You think you are smart," Derek said. His voice was low, devoid of the bluster he had used earlier. "You think hiding behind a lawyer in a shell company makes you safe." "It makes me untouchable," I said. "Nothing is untouchable," Derek hissed. "You have to live here, alone. You have to sleep here. You think a piece of paper protects you from reality?" "Are you threatening me, Derek?" I asked. "I am telling you that this isn't over," he said. "There are other ways to get what is owed. You declared war today. Kayla, you humiliated your father, you cheated your brother, and you wasted my time." He leaned over the table, getting close enough that I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You locked the door," he whispered. "Fine, but windows break, and accidents happen. You want to play legal games? I can play dirty games. We will see how much you love this house when it becomes a prison." My father stood up. He looked old, defeated, but his eyes were hard. "Let's go," he said to my mother. "I don't want to be in this house. It doesn't feel like home anymore." "It hasn't been your home for a long time, Dad," I said. "You just never noticed until you couldn't sell it." They filed out. My mother refused to look at me. Logan stopped at the door, looked at the empty spot in the driveway where he had imagined his truck, and shook his head before following them. Derek was the last to leave. He stopped at the threshold. He didn't look back at me. He looked at the structure of the house. He looked at the beams. He looked at the foundation. He was looking for a new angle of attack. When the door clicked shut, I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel happy. I felt a cold, hard clarity. I had won the battle of the paperwork, but as Derek's car peeled out of the driveway, gravel sprang against the siding. I knew the war had just shifted fronts. They were desperate now, and desperate people do not stop because a notary said no. I picked up my phone and dialed Mara Ellison. "It is done," I said. "They know." "Reaction?" Mara asked. "Hostile," I said. "Derek threatened me, implicitly, but clear." "Then we move to phase 2, Mara said. "I am sending a security team to upgrade your perimeter. And Kayla?" "Yes?" "Don't sleep in the master bedroom tonight." I looked out at the lake. The water was calm, but the wind was picking up. The storm I had predicted was here, and the first thunderclap had just rattled the windows. The digital notification arrived on my phone at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, 48 hours after my family had stormed out of my living room. I was at my desk at Crestline Freight Solutions, reviewing shipping manifests for a convoy of trucks heading to the Pacific Northwest. My phone buzzed with a specific, jarring vibration pattern that I had assigned to only one app, the title monitoring service Mara Ellison had installed. I placed my pen down and picked up the phone. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. After the showdown on Sunday, I had moved past anxiety and into a state of cold, clinical observation. I was no longer a daughter. I was a surveillance operator watching a hostile target. The alert read, "Filing attempt detected. County Clerk Office. Document type. Durable power of attorney." I unlocked the phone and opened the secure portal. The document had been flagged by the system because the name on the filing, Kayla Marie Paul, matched the watch list, even though the property was no longer in my name. The automated system at the county recorder's office had paused the processing due to a metadata mismatch, giving me a window to view the scanned PDF before it was officially rejected or accepted. I downloaded the file. It was 3 pages long. It was a durable power of attorney, granting full financial authority over all assets, real estate, and banking accounts held by Kayla Marie Paul to one Derek Andrew Paul. I scrolled to the bottom of the second page. There, above the signature line, was my name, and below it was a signature that looked vaguely like mine, but with a loop in the P that I had not used since I was in high school. It was a forgery, and a clumsy one at that. It looked like someone had practiced it a dozen times on a napkin and then tried to replicate it with a shaking hand. But it was the second signature that made my stomach turn over. Under the section labeled Witness Affirmation, in a scrawl I recognized instantly, was the name Logan Paul. I stared at the screen. The office sounds of phones ringing and printers humming faded away. I had expected Derek to play dirty. I had expected him to try to intimidate me, but I had held on to a thin, naive hope that Logan was just a pawn, a lazy kid who went along with the loudest voice in the room. I wanted to believe he was passive, not malicious. I was wrong. By signing as a witness, Logan was not just watching the crime, he was participating in it. He was swearing under penalty of perjury that he had watched me sign a document that gave away my freedom. He was willing to sell me out for a truck. I called Mara immediately. "They moved fast," Mara said, her voice crisp and devoid of surprise when I described the document. "A power of attorney. They are trying to bypass the trust. If they have power of attorney over you, they think they can force you to dissolve the LLC or fire me as the trustee." "It is a forgery," I said, "and my brother witnessed it." "It is a felony," Mara corrected. "Attempted fraud, uttering a forged instrument, conspiracy, we have the PDF." I downloaded it. "Good. The county will reject it automatically because the notary stamp they used belongs to a man who died 3 years ago. I checked the commission number. Your uncle bought a fake stamp online. These people are not just greedy. Kayla, they are incompetent criminals. That makes them dangerous." "So we call the police?" I asked. "Not yet," Mara said. "The police will take a report. Derek will claim it was a misunderstanding, or that you verbally agreed and he was just helping with the paperwork. It becomes a he said, she said mess that drags on for months. We need something undeniable. We need to catch them in the act of physical theft." "What do you mean?" "They tried the legal route on Sunday and failed. They tried the bureaucratic fraud route today and failed, or they will fail once the rejection notice hits their mailbox tomorrow. When a predator runs out of tricks, they resort to force. They need the original deed. They need the physical keys. They think if they physically possess the house or the papers, possession is 9/10 of the law. They are going to break in." I realized. "They are going to try," Mara said. "Is the camera system active?" "Yes. Motion sensors on every window and door. Cloud backup." "Good. Go to a hotel tonight. Kayla, do not be in that house. Let the cameras do the work. If they breach the perimeter, we do not just get a restraining order, we get an arrest." I left work early. I did not go to a hotel immediately. Instead, I drove to the lake house one last time before the sun went down. I parked down the road and walked through the woods, approaching my own property like a trespasser. The house looked serene, the water was calm, but I knew the peace was an illusion. I went inside and retrieved the few things that actually mattered to me: my laptop, my grandfather's compass, and a box of old photos. I left the large file cabinet in the study conspicuously unlocked. Inside, I placed a stack of dummy documents. They looked official, but they were nonsense. Drafts of old college essays and expired warranties. If they wanted paper, I would give them paper. I drove to a motel 2 towns over, a place where no one knew my name. I set up my laptop on the small, scratched desk and opened the live feed from the security cameras. I waited. The rejection of the power of attorney must have hit Derek's email around 5 in the afternoon. The reaction was delayed, but inevitable. At 11 at night, the motion sensor on the back deck triggered. I watched the grainy black and white footage on my screen. A figure approached the sliding glass door. They were wearing a dark hoodie, but the walk was unmistakable. It was the slouching, shuffling gait of my brother, Logan. He walked up to the door and peered inside. He cupped his hands against the glass. He was looking for me, or he was looking for the alarm panel. Behind him, standing near the edge of the woods, was a second figure, taller, heavier, Derek. He was holding a flashlight but not turning it on. He was the commander, sending the infantry into the line of fire. I watched Logan try the handle. It was locked. He jiggled it. Then he pulled a tool from his pocket, a a screwdriver. He tried to jam it into the lock mechanism. My heart broke. It did not crack. It shattered. This was the boy I had taught to tie his shoes. This was the boy I had protected from bullies in elementary school. Now, he was standing on my deck, trying to break into my home to steal my future. The lock held. I had installed reinforced strike plates 3 months ago. Logan pushed and pried, but the door did not budge. After 5 minutes of futile scratching, he turned back to Derek and shrugged. Derek gestured angrily, a sharp slashing motion with his hand. They retreated into the darkness. They had not managed to enter, but they had crossed the line. The footage was saved to the cloud instantly. The next morning, Mara sent a formal cease and desist letter via courier to my parents' house and Derek's apartment. It was aggressive. It cited the attempted filing of the forged power of attorney. It cited the trespassing captured on video. It stated clearly that any further contact or attempt to access the property would result in immediate legal action. It was a warning shot. A sane person would have read it and backed down. But my family was not operating on sanity anymore. They were operating on the sunk cost fallacy. They had already spent the money in their heads. They had already told their friends about their windfall. To stop now would be to admit humiliating defeat. At noon on Thursday, my phone rang. It was Derek. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father called. Then my mother. Then Logan. They were swarming. I listened to the voicemail from Derek. His voice was not apologetic. It was seething. Kayla, stop this game. We got a letter from your lawyer? Seriously? You are suing your own family? We know you are bluffing. We know you are scared. You are hiding behind paper because you know you stole that house from us. We are coming over there to talk sense into you. You better open the door, or we are going to open it for you. He did not care about the cameras. He did not care about the law. He believed that his authority as the patriarch's son superseded everything. I called Mara. They ignored the letter, I said. Derek is threatening to break the door down. Then we are at the end game, Mara said. We have the forgery. We have the attempted break-in. Now we need the final piece. We need them to commit a burglary in broad daylight, in front of witnesses. How? We invite them, Mara said, but not to a tea party. We invite them to a crime scene. I understood. They needed to believe I had capitulated. They needed to believe that their intimidation had worked, that I was the weak, scared little girl they had always treated me as. If they thought I was surrendering, they would come with their guard down. They would come to loot. I sat on the edge of the motel bed. I typed a text message to the group chat, the one that included Derek, my parents, and Logan. I typed it 3 times, refining the tone. It had to sound beaten. It had to sound like I was exhausted. I can't take this anymore. I wrote, the lawyers, the fighting, the guilt, you win, I am done. I don't want the house if it means losing my family. The original deed and the trust dissolution papers are in the file cabinet in the study. The back door is unlocked. Just come and get them. Please, just leave me alone after this. I read it over. It was the perfect lie. It played into their ego. It confirmed their bias that I was too weak to hold the line. I hit send. The response was immediate. 3 bubbles popped up instantly. Finally, Derek replied. Smart choice. We knew you would do the right thing, my mother added. On our way, Logan wrote. I packed my laptop. I checked out of the motel. They are coming, I told Mara. We will be waiting, she replied. I drove back toward Maple Cove. I did not park in the driveway. I parked down the street, where Mara's car was already waiting. Next to her was a marked sheriff's vehicle, the engine idling silently. I got into the passenger seat of Mara's car. Did you unlock the back door? Mara asked. No, I said. I lied. Good, Mara said, a razor-thin smile appearing on her face. That means they have to break in, and once they break in, it is burglary in the first degree. We watched the road. 10 minutes later, a convoy of 2 cars, my parents' sedan and Derek's SUV, sped past us, heading toward the lake house. They were driving fast, eager, reckless. They thought they were racing toward a treasure chest. They had no idea they were racing toward a cliff. "Ready?" Mara asked. "Ready," I said. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Logan. "Don't be there when we get there. It will be awkward." I looked at the message and felt a final wave of cold indifference wash over me. "Don't worry, little brother," I whispered to the screen. "I won't be there, but the sheriff will." From the passenger seat of Mara's sedan, parked 200 yards down the road and obscured by a dense thicket of pines, I watched the final act of my family's tragedy unfold. It was not just the 2 cars that had passed us earlier. A third vehicle arrived 5 minutes later. It was a rental truck, a 26-foot moving van with bright orange branding. "They brought a truck," I said, my voice flat. "They didn't just come for the papers, they came to strip the house." "They are confident," Mara noted, adjusting her glasses. "They believe you have surrendered unconditionally. They think they are on a salvage mission." Beside us, the sheriff's cruiser sat silently. Sheriff Miller, a man I had known since high school, was watching through binoculars. He was not intervening yet. He was waiting for the threshold to be crossed. In the eyes of the law, intent is one thing, but action is another. We needed them to commit the act. We watched as Derek got out of his SUV. He looked like a general surveying a conquered battlefield. He waved his arm, directing my father to back the rental truck up the driveway, right to the front porch. The heavy beep, beep, beep of the truck backing up cut through the serenity of the woods like a countdown. My mother got out, carrying empty cardboard boxes. She didn't look like a woman mourning a family relationship. She looked like a shopper on Black Friday. "They are going to find the door locked," I whispered. "And that," Mara said, "is the pivot point. If they turn around and leave, they are just annoying relatives. If they force entry, they are felons." We watched. Logan walked up to the back door. The one I had told them was unlocked in my text message. He tried the handle. He shoved it. He shook his head and yelled something to Derek. Derek stormed over. I could see his gestures. Angry, entitled. He pulled out his phone, likely rereading my text message, checking to see if he had misread the instructions. He hadn't. I had lied. Then I saw it. Derek looked around. He picked up a heavy decorative stone from the garden, a stone my grandmother had painted by hand 20 years ago. He handed it to Logan. Logan hesitated. Derek shouted something, pointing at the glass. Logan swung his arm. The sound of shattering glass did not reach us from this distance, but the visual was clear. The sliding door spiderwebbed and collapsed. Logan reached in, unlocked the mechanism, and slid the broken frame open. "Breaking and entering," Sheriff Miller said, putting down his binoculars. "That is the green light." "Wait," Mara said. "Let them get inside. Let them put their hands on the property. We need the burglary charge to stick." We waited another 10 minutes. It was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I watched shadows moving inside the house that I had fought so hard to protect. I saw my father and Logan carry out the large flat-screen television from the living room. My mother followed with a lamp and a stack of silverware. Derek was carrying the file box from the study, the decoy box I had planted. They were looting me. They were not just taking assets. They were erasing my existence in that house. "Okay," Mara said. "Let's go." Sheriff Miller flipped a switch. The blue and red lights on top of his cruiser exploded into life, silently at first, then accompanied by the short, sharp whoop-whoop of the siren as he pulled onto the road. Mara followed. We rolled up the driveway just as Logan and my father were hoisting my grandmother's antique rocking chair toward the ramp of the truck. The effect was instantaneous. My father dropped his end of the chair. It hit the gravel with a sickening crack. Logan froze, his eyes going wide as saucers. My mother, standing on the porch with a bundle of my linens, dropped them into the dirt. Derek, who had been coming out the front door with the file box, stopped dead in his tracks. Sheriff Miller stepped out of his car. He did not draw his weapon, but his hand rested on his belt. He looked massive, an immovable object of the law. "Step away from the truck," Miller ordered, his voice projecting clearly without shouting. "Put the items down, now." "Officer," Derek started, his voice pitching up an octave into a tone of false outrage. "Officer, thank God you are here. We have a misunderstanding. We were invited. I have the text message right here." He fumbled for his phone, marching down the steps as if to show the sheriff the screen. "I said step away from the truck," Miller repeated, harder this time. "And keep your hands where I can see them." I opened the car door and stepped out, standing next to Mara. The sight of me seemed to confuse them. They looked at the text message on their phones, then at me, then at the broken glass on the porch. "Kayla," my mother cried out, Tell him you told us to come. Show him the text." I stood silent. I let the wind blow through the trees. I looked at the broken rocking chair. I looked at the shattered glass of the back door. "Ms. Paul did send a text," Mara said, stepping forward. Her voice was like a whip crack. "She invited you to pick up documents. She did not invite you to smash a window, break into a secured residence, and steal furniture. That is burglary in the first degree." "We didn't break in," Derek yelled. "The door was stuck. She said it was unlocked." "So you smashed it?" Miller asked, raising an eyebrow. "You didn't call the owner? You didn't knock? You just threw a rock?" "It is my niece's house," Derek's spittle flying from his mouth. "We have power of attorney. I have the papers right here." He slapped the decoy file box he was holding. "I have the authority to manage this estate. This is all legal." "Actually," Miller said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his vest pocket, "that is what we need to talk about, Mr. Derek Paul." "Yes?" "I have a warrant for your arrest, and for Mr. Logan Paul, regarding the filing of a fraudulent legal instrument with the county recorder's office." The color drained from Logan's face so fast, I thought he was going to faint. "What?" Logan squeaked. "Power of attorney," Miller read from the warrant. "Filed yesterday, rejected for invalid notary commission, but the attempt stands, and we have the digital signature verification, and we have the witness affirmation signed by Logan Paul." I didn't," Logan stammered. He looked at Derek. "You said it was fine. You said she agreed to it verbally." "Shut up, Logan," Derek hissed. "No, I won't shut up," Logan shouted, panic taking over. He backed away from the truck. "You told me to sign it. You said Kayla was being difficult and we just needed to grease the wheels. You didn't tell me it was fake. You said the notary was coming later." "He is lying," Derek said quickly, turning to the sheriff. "The kid is confused. He doesn't know what he is talking about." "I am not confused," Logan screamed. He pointed a shaking finger at Derek. "You printed it out at the library. You practiced her signature in the car. I watched you." The silence that followed was total. My parents looked from Logan to Derek, their mouths open in horror. They had just watched their golden boy, their investment, implicate himself and their leader in a felony. "That is enough," Sheriff Miller said. "Derek Paul, Logan Paul, turn around and place your hands behind your backs." "You can't do this," my father sputtered, stepping forward. "This is a family matter. We are resolving a dispute. Kayla, tell them to stop. Tell them." He looked at me. His eyes were pleading, but underneath the pleading, there was still that demand. "Fix this. Clean up our mess." I looked at my father. "I can't fix a felony. Dad, I warned you. Mara sent you a letter. I told you to leave me alone. You chose to break the window." "We are your parents," my mother wailed. "Logan is your brother. You are going to send him to jail over a house?" "He broke into my home," I said coldly, "and he tried to steal my identity, to steal my property. He is not my brother right now. He is a suspect." Sheriff Miller cuffed Derek first. The metallic click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the clearing. Derek was not fighting physically, but his eyes were darting around, looking for an escape, a loophole, a person to blame. When Miller moved to cuff Logan, my brother started to cry. It was a pathetic, heaving sound. "Kayla, please," Logan sobbed. I didn't want to. Derek made me. I just wanted the truck. I'm sorry. Please don't let them take me. I watched him. I remembered the times I had covered for him. I remembered the money I had given him. I remembered the way he had smirked when he thought he was taking my car. You are 25 years old. Logan, I said. Derek didn't make you pick up that rock. Derek didn't make you sign that paper. You did it because you thought it was easy money. Ms. Ellison, Sheriff Miller said, securing Logan in the back of the cruiser. I am going to need statements from you and the homeowner. We will impound the rental truck as evidence since it contains stolen property. My silver, my mother gasped. That is my silver in there. It is in the truck, ma'am, Miller said. It is evidence now. Derek was shoved into the back seat next to Logan. He glared at me through the window. The look was pure venom. He wasn't sorry. He was just furious that he had lost to a girl he thought was stupid. My parents were left standing in the driveway. Their car was not blocked, but they looked paralyzed. The structure of their lives, the hierarchy where they ruled and I served, had just been demolished by a badge and a pair of handcuffs. Go home, I told my parents. Home? My father whispered. You just arrested your brother. I didn't arrest him, I said, turning to walk back to Mara's car. I just stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. You are dead to us, my mother hissed. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard hate. Do you hear me? You are dead to us. I stopped. I didn't turn around. I have been dead to you for years, Mom, I said. You just didn't notice until I stopped paying for the funeral. I got into the car. Mara started the engine. As we drove away, following the sheriff's cruiser with its flashing lights, I watched in the rearview mirror. My parents were standing in the dust, two small, shrinking figures in front of a house they would never enter again. The U-Haul sat open and abandoned, a gaping mouth that had tried to swallow me whole and choked. Are you okay? Mara asked quietly. I don't know, I said honestly, but I am free. Not yet, Mara said. Derek is going to talk. He's going to try to deal. We need to be ready for the legal counterattack, but for tonight, the castle is secure. I looked at the handcuffs on Logan's wrists through the glass of the cruiser ahead of us. I felt a pang of sadness, sharp and deep, for the little boy he used to be. But then I remembered the forgery. I remembered the smirk, and I remembered the rock crashing through my glass. The sadness faded, replaced by the cool, clean air of survival. The fallout from the arrest was not immediate silence. It was a cacophony of legal noise. Derek and Logan spent 24 hours in county lockup before my parents managed to scrape together the bail money. They had to take a high-interest emergency loan against their own pension to do it, a financial wound that was entirely self-inflicted. 3 days later, we met in the sterile conference room of the district attorney's office. It was a plea negotiation session. Derek's lawyer was a court-appointed public defender who looked overworked and smelled of stale tobacco. My parents were there, looking shrunken and gray. Logan sat with his head in his hands. Derek, however, still had that glint of defiance in his eyes. He was convinced he could talk his way out of a felony. My client maintains that this was a family misunderstanding. Derek's lawyer droned, shuffling papers. He believed he had verbal consent to manage the property. He is willing to plead to a lesser charge of misdemeanor trespassing if the fraud charges are dropped, and as part of the settlement, the family insists that the original asset dispute be resolved. I sat next to Mara Ellison. I looked at Derek. He was wearing the same suit he had worn to the failed asset talk, but now it was wrinkled, and the arrogance hung off him like a loose thread. We are not dropping the fraud charges, Mara said calmly. We have the digital trail. We have the forged signature. We have the witness testimony. Kayla, my father interrupted, his voice cracking. Please, he is your uncle. Logan is your brother. You can't let them have a criminal record. It will ruin their lives. Just give them what they want. Give them the house. You don't even own it anymore, right? Just sign over whatever rights you have left, and let's end this nightmare. Yeah, Derek sneered. leaning forward. "You played a cute trick with the LLC, Kayla, but we know you are the beneficiary. You still control the flow. Assign the beneficiary interest to us. If you do that, we will consider the matter settled. We won't sue you for emotional distress or malicious prosecution." It was breathtaking. He was facing 5 years in prison, yet he was still trying to negotiate a hostile takeover. He truly believed that my fear of ruining the family was greater than my desire for justice. I looked at Mara. She gave me a barely perceptible nod. This was the moment we had prepared for. The final trap. "Okay," I said. The room went quiet. Derek's eyes widened. "I am tired," I continued, infusing my voice with a heavy dose of exhaustion. "I am tired of the police. I am tired of the fighting. You want my place in the family legacy? You want to be the ones responsible for the Maple Cove estate?" "Yes," Derek said quickly. "That is all we ever wanted. Stewardship." "Fine," I said. "I will give it all to you, right now." Mara reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document. It was thick, bound in blue legal backing. The title read, "Assignment of Beneficiary Interest and Assumption of Liabilities." This document transfers Kayla's entire position as the primary beneficiary of the Maple Cove Legacy Management Trust to the Paul family, Mara explained. "It grants you full rights to occupy the residence and full rights to the use of the assets contained therein, effective immediately." Derek practically snatched the pen from his lawyer's hand. He didn't read the text. He didn't check the appendices. He just saw the words transfer and beneficiary and saw $1 million payday. "You are doing the right thing, Kayla." My mother sniffled, clutching my father's hand. Finally. Derek signed with a flourish. He forced Logan to sign as a secondary beneficiary. My parents signed as witnesses. "Done," Derek said, slamming the pen down. "Now, tell the DA to drop the charges." "We will recommend leniency regarding the jail time," Mara said, collecting the papers. "But the plea deal stands. You still have to plead guilty to the trespassing. However, congratulations. You are now the beneficiaries of the estate." Derek smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just swallowed the canary. "See? I told you she would fold. I told you." "There is just one thing," I said, standing up. "Since you are now the beneficiaries, you are also responsible for the obligations attached to that position. The trust was set up to be self-sustaining, funded by the beneficiary." Mara slid a second piece of paper across the table. It was an invoice. "What is this?" Derek asked, picking it up. "That is the current balance due to the LLC," Mara said professionally. "As the new beneficiaries, you have assumed the lease agreement held by the trust. The fair market rental value of the property is $4,200 a month. Plus, the trust bylaws require the beneficiary to cover the annual property taxes, which are due next week, totaling $14,000. And of course, there is the matter of the extraordinary maintenance fee." "Maintenance fee?" Logan asked, his voice trembling. "The sliding glass door you shattered," I said. "And the damage to the antique flooring caused by dropping the rocking chair. The LLC has billed the beneficiary for repairs. That is another $6,000. And," Mara added, delivering the final blow, "by signing the Assumption of Liabilities clause on page 4, you also agreed to reimburse the trust for all legal fees incurred during the defense of the estate against hostile actions. That includes my bill for the last 2 weeks, $25,000. Derek's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being before. It was a mix of purple and gray. He looked down at the document he had just signed. He flipped to page 4. There it was, in black and white, right above his signature. This is fraud!" Derek screamed, jumping to his feet. "You tricked me. I thought I was getting the house." "You got the right to live in the house," I corrected him. "Subject to the terms of the trust. You wanted my life. Derek, you wanted my position. You have it. You have the bills. You have the taxes. You have the maintenance. And you have the debt." "I won't pay it," Derek yelled. "I will sue." "You can't," Derek's own lawyer said, looking at the document with a pained expression. You signed a binding waiver, and since you just admitted on the record that you wanted stewardship, you have legally accepted the fiduciary responsibility. If you don't pay, the trust can evict you and sue you for the balance, and they will win." My parents sat frozen. They had mortgaged their pension for bail. Now, they were staring at a debt of nearly $50,000 that was due immediately, attached to a house they could not sell, could not leverage, and could barely afford to heat. Logan looked at me. For the first time, there was no entitlement in his eyes. There was only the crushing realization of reality. "You knew," Logan whispered. "You knew we would sign without reading." "I knew you were greedy," I said. "And I knew you thought I was stupid. That is a dangerous combination." "We are ruined," my father whispered. "Kayla, you have ruined us." "I saved myself," I said. "There is a difference." Derek lunged across the table. The bailiff stepped in instantly, restraining him. "You witch!" Derek screamed, spitting as he struggled against the officer. "You planned this! You planned this whole thing!" "I planned a dinner party," I said, picking up my purse. "You planned a robbery. You just picked the wrong house." I walked to the door. I looked back at them one last time. My mother was weeping into her hands. My father was staring at the wall. Logan was looking at his shoes, and Derek was being held back by a guard, panting like a trapped animal. "I gave it all to you," I said, my voice echoing in the small room. "I gave you the keys. I gave you the papers. I gave you the legacy. I just didn't give you what you wanted. I gave you what you deserved." I walked out of the room and down the long hallway of the courthouse. The air outside was fresh and cold. I walked to my car, which was fully paid off and registered in my name only, and got in. I drove away from the city, away from the lake house, and away from the people who shared my DNA, but not my heart. I had no destination in mind, just a full tank of gas and a life that was finally, completely mine. The rearview mirror was empty, and for the first time in 29 years, so was my conscience. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed this journey of justice and liberation. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country, and let's share our thoughts on Kayla's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.